Hello. So I guess I'll start by saying that I think I want to make a few videos about this virus stuff and all this stuff in the media. We're being lied to so much about the virus, and we can say what we want to everybody, saying, oh, they're lying about this, they're lying about that. And we can't really expect people to believe all that because they believe that the media and governments tell them the truth. So I've got so much to say that I'm going to try and break this all down into about three or four different videos. So I think where we need to start is we got to start by explaining the history of the media, how the media works, the corporate media, and show people why we can't trust them, and also why we can't trust the U.S. government mainly. Show the history, show the progression of what they've done over time to show you why they lie and why we can't trust them. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start with this. Okay, so I think the biggest thing we need to know about the mainstream media, it's corporate owned. Okay, it's called the corporate media. Okay, why? Because six corporations control 90% of all media, at least in North America. You got GE, you have Disney, you have Time Warner, you have Viacom, you have CBS, and you have News Corp. That is a lot of power in very few people. Okay, you can't trust corporations. Okay, they all have their own political agenda. They all lean this way, lean that way. They're basically telling us through their production companies what they want us to know, what their narratives are. Okay, and then you got to also find out what networks are under these corporations. Like, for instance, Time Warner owns CNN. Well, who's the majority stockholder of Time Warner? As far as I know, it's a multi-billionaire Israeli named Aviv Nevo. So you gotta understand who owns what networks are under the umbrella of Viacom, of CBS, and see what narratives and agendas they want you to know. Okay, and you also have like people in different networks sit on boards of directors of other networks, boards of directors of pharmaceutical industries. They all work together. You have to figure this out for yourself. Okay, there's too many conflicts of interest going on. Okay, so that now let's take a look at some of the history of the media. What you got to understand are two things, though, and I covered this in a previous video. You have to understand what MK Ultra was. Okay, it was a CIA experiment, I believe 50s, 60s, and 70s, or one of those two decades. I can't remember, where it was basically just testing people about the effects of psychedelics on the mind, seeing how various ways you can control people's minds, different ways to influence people, and out of that you can find out you can control people through the media, through repetitiveness, through images. It was basically just a whole complete mind control experiment that has had decades and decades to evolve since then. So you have to do your research on MK Ultra, and you also have to know what Operation Mockingbird was, another CIA program in the 70s, where they basically infiltrated all mainstream networks, all corporate media networks, either with their own or paid the journalists themselves to basically propagate the public. And there was even hearings about this, whether it was a Senate hearing or Congress hearings, they even had hearings about it. There's videos on YouTube you can go watch yourself. And they even talk about, people are asking some of these people involved, did you pay people to do this? And there were people that were basically saying, well, I can't either answer that or, yeah, it is true. So you have to understand MK Ultra and Operation Mockingbird. And Operation Mockingbird and MK Ultra were both CIA programs. Okay, so let's talk about the CIA. The CIA's involvement in Hollywood. Out of the Shadows did a great documentary recently that's being censored everywhere on the CIA's involvement in Hollywood, how much they influence Hollywood movies and how much propaganda they put in Hollywood movies. Okay, you have like stuff like the Men in Black, where they try to ridicule the Men in Black and make it a joke. Independence Day, the CIA did not want references to Area 51 in that movie, but the director somehow got away with it anyway. Like, the CIA has a lot of pull in what goes on in Hollywood and the media. Okay, you have to understand the CIA's involvement in the media with all this that's going on. Okay, so then you have the CIA's involvement in media. You have six corporations involved in media. Okay, well, who else is involved? Well, there's a lot of big tech companies involved in the media also. Look at Jeff Bezos, okay, the CEO of Amazon, world's richest guy, right, with $150 billion or whatever. Well, a couple of years ago, or at least last year, he made a $660 million odd deal with the CIA. Alexa! Oh, sorry. Oh, Alexa. Keep that in mind, okay? He also owns the Washington Post. And actually, a few years ago, someone did an article in the Washington Post very critical of Amazon, and he got fired. So you cannot criticize those in power. There's an old saying that says, to find out who's in power, find out who you cannot criticize. Well, who do networks like CNN never criticize? They never criticize the CIA. They never investigate the CIA. They never bring up Project MK Ultra or Mockingbird or anything. They're never overly critical of Israel, of the FBI. They never investigate these other government agencies. Why? Because they're all intertwined together. You have to do your research and find who owns this, who's on the board of directors of what, who has shares in this, and then the big picture comes into play. It's what I call the governed media. The governed media industrial complex, whatever it is you want to call it. They're all intertwined together, okay? That's why you cannot trust the media. All right. I mean, a great example of a lie CNN did. Oh my God, this was like in 2014, 2015. They had Ashley Banfield and Nancy Grace supposedly in two different states or whatever it was, and the interviewer was interviewing them, and they in one screenshot they had trucks and cars going by, and then in Nancy Grace's little screen in her background, the same trucks would go by, and they were supposedly in a different state. And then I know this is bullshit because even Jon Stewart went on his show and he called CNN out. He showed it on his show and he's like, really, CNN? Like, really? So you'll see they lie all the time, and it's just propaganda. You got to question this stuff. You got to question everybody's motives and who these people are. You can't trust the media. You cannot trust the mainstream media, okay? Okay, so now let's look at the history of the U.S. government and their lies and why we can't trust them, and why we can't trust them about this virus. Have they lied in the past? Well, if they were, well, they're probably lying now, aren't they? Okay, so let's see. So I mean, I can go through so many instances, but let's just take a few prominent ones that are fairly recent. First, let's start off with the definition of false flag, okay? You got to know what a false flag is. There's many forms, it comes in different variations, but it's basically when one entity causes an event and they blame it on another entity for political gain, basically, okay? You can also have something where an event happens and it's allowed to happen. Like, say, you can say like a Pearl Harbor, the stand down of the whole fleet, and they allowed the Japanese to just bomb them, even though the commander knew the codes or the government knew the codes and didn't tell the Japanese commander about them. Or you can say like a 9/11, it was allowed to happen. So there's many different false flags, but you got to understand what a false flag is. Okay, so let's go back a little, maybe 50 years ago, the Gulf of Tonkin. Great example of a false flag. I think there was two alleged bombings of a U.S. warship in the Gulf of Tonkin. The first one happened, and then the second one is when the U.S. government said, "Oh, our ship got bombed by the Vietnamese," and that's what got them into the Vietnam War. Okay, when they said, "Oh, our ship got bombed," that's our entrance into the Vietnam. We're in the war. All right. Yeah, decades later, it was proven that event never happened. No ship got bombed. They lied themselves into the war. Don't believe me? Look it up. Google it, whatever. Read about it. Look it up. It happened. That was a prominent false flag. Well documented. Documents released under the Freedom of Information Act. Okay, that happened. Another disgusting, this is one of the worst things that the U.S. government's ever planned of, Operation Northwoods. This was an event. This wasn't an event. It was a plan. It was constructed in 1961. It was actually approved. It was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the only way that this didn't end up happening was JFK, John F. Kennedy himself said, not happening. If he would have approved it, this stuff would have happened. Under the Operation Northwoods, one of the most prominent things that they thought of. These were ways that the U.S. government can conjure up false flags and blame them on Cuba. This was during the whole Cuban Missile Crisis. You had an instance where they would hijack a Cuban plane in the air, replace it with a American plane painted as a Cuban plane, or vice versa. blow up the plane and then blame it on Cuba. Okay, that was what they were trying to do, as well as come up with many different ways in which the Cubans on the ground would be killed, and they would be blaming the Cubans on it themselves. They'd be killing Cubans, and it was the Cubans who were doing it to themselves. There were like 20 different scenarios in which they were planning out false flag attacks on the Cubans to blame the Cubans so that the U.S. could go and intervene. Look up Operation Northwoods. It is scary, disgusting what people plan, okay? And then you also had Nixon in 74 lying about Watergate. Another good one, the 1991 Gulf War. That was all based on a lie, based on babies in incubators having their incubators pulled, their cords pulled, or whatever it was. They were dying or whatever, and then all these fires that were started allegedly that were actually started on purpose. And then the U.S. said, "Oh, well, we got to get in there and defend the Kuwaitis." All lies, nothing but lies. Okay. Of course, a prominent liar in government in the U.S. 1996, Bill Clinton. "Oh, I did not have sexual relations with that woman." Yeah, you did, buddy. Okay, you lied. All right, you lied out your ass. Okay, screw that guy. And then, of course, one of the biggest lies. I could do a 20-hour show on 9/11. 9/11 is just riddled with lies. I won't even begin. Okay. One of the biggest false flag events ever. Lies, lies, lies. And then after that, well, they lied about the Iraqi Saddam Hussein weapons of mass destruction, invaded Iraq based on lies. They never found any. The Iraq government was actually working with the U.S. behind the scenes to actually, they had like billion-dollar deals with cars, with medicine they were going to provide Americans with. They were working with America behind the scenes. Doesn't matter. America lied about the weapons of mass destruction. Boom, invaded, lynched Saddam Hussein. What else have they lied about? They lied about Libya with Gandhi. They lied about how he was a dictator doing all this. They lied about the Syria gas attacks. They've tried this so many times. They've lied to try to get Bashar al-Assad out of power. Hillary Clinton lying about the whole Libya scandal, her emails. Lying to Congress, saying she didn't know what C meant, that it's classified. I mean, it's just all the U.S. government does is lie. Okay, so we have the media, the mainstream media. You have U.S. government. They work together. Now they may not necessarily always agree with each other, but they can't have one without the other. So they work together to promote agendas and lies. That's how this works. So with all this media knowledge, with all these lies that the U.S. has perpetuated in the past, why should we believe anything they're saying about this virus? They're already lying about the death count. They don't know how many people are infected, the ventilators. We don't know what's true. Why should we trust the U.S. government and the U.S. media when they have a history of lying out their ass and propagating us to death? Okay? So that's why we shouldn't believe anything we hear in the media about this virus. Research on your own and figure out the truth on your own, because you ain't going to get it by going power, guide, channel, okay. Ain't going to happen, okay? So another video I'll do another day, maybe tomorrow, will be about another topic related to this. There's just so much I can say I can't cover it all in one video. So think about all that. Don't believe me. Research on your own. Research, vet, research everything. That's what you got to do in this era of fake news and disinformation, okay? All right.